Now, what's driving these targeted ethnic killings?
Well, our latest report is documenting what is just the latest wave of targeted attacks by rapid support forces and their allied militia in West Darfur. As you pointed out, we had already seen a campaign which lasted almost 7 weeks back between April and June, which led to over 300,000 people, mainly from the town of Geneina in West Darfur, seeking refuge in Chad. And what we're seeing in terms of the waves of abuse are targeted killings, particularly of Massalit men, summary executions. In the latest wave, we documented how the RSF forces and the allied militia rounded up hundreds of men, but also boys, in the suburb of Geneina called Ardamata town. This was very symbolic because Ardamata was the last place in West Darfur where the Sudanese armed forces had a garrison, had a military base. And that was basically taken over by those forces on November the 4th. And after the taking of the garrison, they then went on a rampage where they killed civilians, subjected women to sexual violence, and also destroyed a lot of civilian property. We have seen this again and again throughout West Darfur, where they are using arson and other forms of destructions to entirely wipe out neighborhoods where these communities have been living.
Laetitia, and this comes on the heels of this pending closure of the United Nations office or mission in Sudan. What impact would the closure of that office be to these people that you're referring to and the atrocities, the pillaging that's going on in Sudan?
Yeah, I mean, the timing couldn't be worse. The UN has been walking away from its responsibilities to protect civilians, especially in Darfur, for years now. And I think, as your report just showed, there have been many communities in Darfur who were against the pulling out of the African Union, United Nations peacekeeping force in 2020. We saw the direct consequences of that. We saw attacks in West Darfur starting even before the recent. And now you have the UN potentially ending its political mission. It was a weak political mission from the start. It didn't prioritize the situation of communities in Darfur. It didn't prioritize human rights reporting and protections of civilians. But right now we could be talking about the UN completely walking away from its responsibility to protect civilians at such a critical time. So what is key is for UN Security Council member states, and that includes a lot of the African Union members, the 3 who are sitting at the Security Council, to basically make clear that there is a role for the UN to protect civilians in the current context in Sudan, and there needs to be the political clout and fight to ensure that that civilian protection is put in place and continues.
You talk about protection, but in what way can the international law be applied to for those responsible for the atrocities that are being committed in Sudan? And hopefully this is not going to be a forgotten war, because we're dealing with a lot of crises around the world as we speak.
I mean, I think Sudan is a very clear example of where impunity and cycles of impunity lead to further instability and conflict. And so there needs to be concerted action against those who are responsible for the abuses. So we, in our most recent report, are calling as a first step for the sanctioning of 3 individuals, the head of the RSF, his brother, deputy in command of the RSF, who was present in Ardamata suburb on the day the rampage against civilians started. And also the commander of the RSF in West Darfur, who has been the commander there throughout these waves of attacks. So sanctioning, clear messages that abuses lead to consequences. But of course, there needs to be support from the global community for the International Criminal Court investigations, which are ongoing, including into the more recent bouts of abuses and violence in Darfur. And also there needs to be support by the global community for the new mechanism which has been established by the Human Rights Council in Geneva to investigate abuses in Darfur, but also in Khartoum. There needs to be a record and there needs to be action taken against individuals.